Hey guys, Willie Geist here with another episode of the Sunday Sitdown podcast. My thanks as always for clicking and listening along. My guest this week, Robert Pattinson. He once of Twilight heartthrob fame, and now the star of a new film that's getting a lot of Oscar buzz called The Lighthouse, a very interesting movie, and I will explain why in just a minute. Joining me, as always, the producer of this fine podcast, Maggie Law. Hello, Maggie.
Hi, Willie.
And the producer of the Robert Pattinson interview for Sunday Today, Sylvie Haller. Hey, Sylvie, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
So we should, Sylvie, attempt to explain this movie. Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe. It's basically just the two of them for almost 2 hours. There's one other actor who pops in, but it's mostly the two of them. It's set in the 1890s in Halifax. They're on a lighthouse on an island together. But importantly, the film is in black and white, and also it's in the easy way to explain it is it's kind of shrunken down into a box.
With like a vintage look. Gives you that old-fashioned film look.
Yeah, how would you explain sort of the physical presentation of it?
Well, it reminds you of old films, and because of it, you kind of focus much more on the people's faces and their emotions because it's black and white, and it is compressed. It makes everything look very different than what we're used to with color and with 16 by 9 widescreen with all sorts of information. It's less information, but it's really intense information.
Yeah, you do have to focus in on it. And at first, it's a little disorienting.
Right.
You watch it, you say, is this a flashback at the
Right.
beginning of the movie? And then you realize about
That's
15
the whole
minutes in,
movie.
we're going all the way
That's
through
the whole
like
thing.
this.
Interesting.
But it isn't, it's almost like a play. It's like
Right.
the kind of movie he's done. Since Twilight ended, there were 5 of those. In 2012, he sort of took himself out of the blockbuster world.
Went a little
And
more
he
like
does these like
indie,
artsy
films.
indie
Interesting.
movies. So it kind of follows in a tradition. And he was so big, got so famous, so young in those Twilight movies that I think that was like a rational choice for him to like
Take a
out
step
of the
back a little
spotlight
bit,
for a while.
right?
Yeah.
He said for a time that he couldn't go outside of his house, that people were picking through his trash, that he had, people were just stalking his life. And it really changed how he could live. So I think that speaks to what you're saying, that he kind of picked a whole nother kind of work where he'd have a lower profile but could do the kind of art he wanted to do.
Yeah, he talks in other interviews about having to hide in the trunks of cars, being chased all over the place by paparazzi. And I think it was a conscious decision to kind of like get out of that. But he was a great interview, but I do feel like he still carries some of that with him, a little bit guarded and who do I trust? What do I say to people? I think he's been burned a lot in his life as a star. And so he carries that around with him.
I agree with you, but I think that you have a way of like getting through that with people. And it's one of the strengths of these sit downs because you have the time.
Yeah.
And what I found was that he opened up to you and he was sort of honest and he talked about his anxiety when he auditions, his anxiety about whether he's going to have another job. I mean, you'd think the guy's got such a successful career and is so famous that he wouldn't worry about that anymore.
Yeah.
But he really told you a lot of sort of intimate things about his feelings about his career. And I thought that was very interesting.
I think you're right. The advantage is that we do have all this time when we do these interviews. If you're doing a quick 5-minute pop about whatever the movie of the moment is, you're not going to get through any of that initial barrier. So, yeah, he did. I'm always surprised. I remember Ed Norton in a recent interview we did for this podcast said the same thing, that every time he goes up for a new movie audition or even getting on set the first day, he feels like a fraud, like I shouldn't be here.
It's amazing.
I'm not good enough to be
amazing.
here. And Robert Pattinson kind of says the same thing, and that feeds all that anxiety he has. By the way, Maggie, he's also, we talk about this arc of super big blockbuster down to art films. He's coming back
up to a big blockbuster.
as Batman.
Yeah, I'm excited for that one. I feel like I've seen every iteration of the Batman. And I love that you asked him about being a superhero, and he was like, not a superhero.
I know.
He was like very important to him.
He jumped me
You're
on
like,
that
but he doesn't
one.
have a cape.
He's
which
got
is
a
fair
cape.
point.
Doesn't a cape make you a superhero? He said, well, he doesn't have
Super
any powers.
power.
He's just a guy who puts on a suit and goes and solves crimes. But so, yeah, we get into that conversation, too, of, okay, he kind of like stepped back from the spotlight for a few years, and he's aware and I think prepared to step back into it now
Yep.
when he puts on that suit, because there's no avoiding it when you play Batman.
Well, he really thinks that he's not going to get a lot of attention. He thinks he's old and nobody cares. And
I don't
it's
think
really
he knows
funny.
what he's in for
How old
if
is
he's
he,
playing
Maggie?
Batman.
33, right?
33, yes, correct. I thought that was so funny. He said like he was entering his middle-aged years, and I immediately Googled how old is Robert Pattinson? 33. Okay.
Well, I guess you feel that way when you have that much
Success so
that
early.
young.
I
It feels
totally
like he's been around
understand.
for 100 years.
Right.
But the grizzled old 33-year-old. So the movie's really cool, and it's fun to hear him explain it, because you'll have to see it for yourself, but it is so unique and such a different kind of film. And as I said, a lot of people are going to be talking about it for awards. So Robert Pattinson joins us right now on the Sunday Sit Down podcast. Robert, thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having
I
me.
appreciate it. I told you I just got finished watching the film. It is as extraordinary as everyone has said it is.
Cool.
I was thinking to myself, how would I describe this film to someone? And I couldn't come up with a great answer. What would you
Oh God, I thought you were going to tell it for me, and I was like, "Thank God!" I thought you've.
This is all you,
this
man.
Is the question I cannot answer.
This is all you. I mean, what? Just in a nutshell, what would you say this is a film about?
It is. It's about two guys.
See, it's hard.
I've done 1,000 interviews about this, and I still can't do it. It's about two guys. Essentially, it's about two guys in a lighthouse, and they don't know what's going on either. No, it's kind of. It's kind of a thing about whether their isolation is slowly driving them insane, or whether the light in the lighthouse, at the top of the lighthouse, has some kind of supernatural power over them, whether the whole island on this rocky outcropping that this lighthouse is on, whether there is something going on which isn't completely normal, or whether these two guys are just drinking themselves into oblivion, or whether it's a kind of combination of the two. But amongst other things, lots of other different elements, and maybe it's Willem Dafoe might be Prometheus.
Just as an add-on at the end, he might be Prometheus. So when you receive a script like this, and you read it on the page, you have respect for the director, so you know that they're onto something probably. What was your reaction to reading the story? Did it click with you right away? Did you get it?
Yeah, I mean, there was something which is immediately it struck me, the originality of it. Like there's something so specific in the language that normally you would get, that you could feel that it's very, very researched, and there's something so particular in the kind of colloquial dialect that normally you'd see that in a very, very serious kind of historical drama, and then suddenly there'd be these kind of slapstick comedy elements to it, and then suddenly like this kind of absurdist, surreal horror fantasy stuff that was like Buñuel or something, and they had these really, really, really disparate elements, and it was all kind of holding together in this, I don't know, it felt like you were walking down a tightrope of different tones, and I just thought it was so striking, and I remember reading it thinking, how is this going to work at all? And then on top of that, you see it's going to be in the Academy ratio, the kind of old boxy TV ratio, and in black and white. It's like, well, no one's going to see this. And then for some reason, like, it's kind of, I've seen it with multiple audiences now, and they're just like, everybody's laughing away, and I'm like, wow. I had no idea that there was an appetite for kind of sailor yarns.
Late 19th century sailor yarns. I mean, I agree with you. I didn't expect to laugh in the first couple of minutes. I was sort of bracing, but there are moments of humor in it. And as you say, what strikes you first, obviously, is just the visual of it, which is that it's in that aspect ratio, that it is black and white. Some part of you thinks, okay, we're starting with a flashback or something. And then you realize that the entire film will appear this way. What did you think about that presentation when you first heard it be shot that way?
I just think it's so funny how it's so shocking to people that it's funny because you see people going further and further and further in the other direction. Like if you're working with widescreen, kind of getting doing more and more computer-generated stuff, spending hundreds of millions of dollars in the budget, and you just make the screen smaller, and people are like, "Whoa!"
Right.
It feels like a special effect, but it has such a visceral effect on an audience, and also I think it makes people feel like it's sort of an unearthed movie from the 20s or something.
Yes.
And then when it sort of divulges into this kind of nightmarish scenario, it's like, if you'd found this movie from the 20s and this happened in it, then it would have been just the craziest movie you could ever find. But yeah, it has a really big effect on people, which is great.
Yeah, for people who haven't seen the film, it almost looks like an old photograph, or what you would imagine an old photograph from that time period to be. Was it always set to appear that way, or was that something that the director came to and said, "Oh, I think the story would be better told this way"?
No, it was on the first page of the script. It said it was an Academy ratio, and it had a mono soundtrack, and I was like, wow. It's like before we'd shot a frame. But yeah, I think it does look incredibly beautiful, and I think when I think I shot about 3 weeks, and I saw the way it makes your body look when you're kind of there's a scene when I'm pushing this wheelbarrow of coal and falling over in the rain. I spent a lot of time pushing wheelbarrows of coal.
You did, I noticed that.
It does, that ratio does something to kind of elongate your body, and it kind of ends up looking like that sort of Buster Keaton-y kind of, it makes everything look a little bit more spindly. And I think as soon as I saw that, because I wanted to lean more into the comedic stuff. And it helps to do everything with Willem as well, who just seems to, no matter how dark he's going, it seems, I don't know, he just always seems a bit mischievous.
So it's the two of you, effectively. There's an appearance a couple of times from another actress, but it's effectively the two of you locked in that Academy ratio in that box together for the entire film. How did you get ready for a performance like this, in terms of creating that character, but also knowing you were going to be doing battle with Willem for 2 hours?
I mean, it's kind of frightening, because I've seen so many amazing performances that Willem's done. I know he can bring a level of intensity that like hardly any other actors can do. And there was so much good stuff on the page that it just felt like it was sort of down to you to mess it up a little bit. So I think in the prep period, I just avoided everyone at all costs. So I just didn't want to say any of the lines, because it's one of those parts where it just felt like it was it's a kind of leap of faith sort of part. Like, I feel like that these scenes, the adrenaline level is so high, I just thought my only chance at this is to just charge yourself up and then sort of explode at each other. But yeah, I mean, it's very fun doing it with him.
I've heard conversation between the two of you where he said when the rehearsal period, he was playing the character and he noticed you were sort of low-key about the way you were playing it. He didn't know how to react to that exactly, but it sounds like you were sort of saving it for the performance.
Yeah, I was being kind of, wasn't wasn't sharing. Because Willem seems like he has an infinite ways of playing a scene, whereas I kind of had like 3 ideas. and I think if I'd played them too early, Willem would have been able to kind of recalibrate his performance and kind of swallow me a little bit. Right. Like, because there's something, I don't know, I hate it when the other actor in the scene it looks like he's expecting what I'm about to do. Right. And you can see he's faking his reaction. I want it to be a real reaction of kind of surprise or something. And there's only so many times you can surprise someone. And so I think I was just trying to hold everything back until the last possible minute, really.
That's so interesting, though, because it almost sounds, you think of acting as collaborative, almost adversarial. Oh, yeah. Like you had to hold something back so that you could give it to him in the film.
I'm not a team player at all. I want to win.
Is that a regular strategy for you, by the way, in a rehearsal or in an audition, to hold back a little bit? Or is it just something about this?
In an audition, I was always terrible at it, because I don't know, I could never figure out the, I could never figure out the rules of the game or the playing field, so I was just, it was just, the anxiety was too much for me.
You've done pretty well with your auditions, I've noticed.
I just sort of, I mean, you just need, I guess you just need one. You just need one to work.
Right.
But yeah. But no, not really. I mean, I like it, but I like it with Willem as well. It's kind of, I love it when people surprise me. It's acting so much more fun when you're just being reactive rather than, I don't know, you've made you've made a plan and you're sticking to it. Like, you know, I hate working with people who I can tell that they've done it like in front of a mirror, and then like, and it's like no matter what you do, you can't change, you can't push them off course. Like, I like it kind of when neither actor knows where they're going or what's going on. They just feel like they're very much in the present.
And would you say that's more common than not, that the person has already rehearsed their lines in the mirror, they've come with their performance and here it is, or do you find a good actor does not do that?
I think you can be really good either way. I mean, it's just really in terms of enjoyability. Like, it's kind of, and also that I can't really do it the way which you make a plan. So it's kind of, if someone else can do it, it makes it very difficult for me.
I mean, it looked, just being up there, looked, and I say this in a positive way because it fed the performance, it looked miserable up there. I mean, it looked cold and rainy, and I believed that you were on that rock for 3 or 4 weeks or whatever it was. What was it like shooting?
It was very cold and rainy, but it's beautiful in Nova Scotia. I mean, it's kind of, it's one of those places. We were on this place called Cape Horseshoe in a little town called Yarmouth, and it's just one of those places where it's like a little microclimate where you can kind of, it will be a beautiful sunny day, and then like 1 minute later we'll just have enormous hailstones and snowing 5 seconds later, and it's just, there are more seasons than you kind of realize that there could possibly be, but they're all played out in about 3 hours.
Is it really true that you went up there a little bit early before the shoot to sort of get acclimated and to feel what it might be like to live there in real life?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of always want to go as early as possible. But yeah, Willem did the whole 9 yards and was living in a tiny little fisherman's cottage by himself and only eating beans.
Is that right?
For like months.
And you weren't willing to go that far?
I didn't know that was an option. I mean, literally, but you can see from all the farting in the movie, it's definitely.
There is a lot of that, I notice.
Willem likes to claim that a lot of them improvised.
That was one of my first laughs. I said, oh, this is going to be a bit different up in the attic there.
It's definitely a bean-heavy diet.
You've heard, undoubtedly, I don't know whether it interests you or not, people talking about this performance in Willem's both being worthy of acclaim and awards. Is that something that you're interested in? Is that something that you listen to? Is it something that's important to you to be nominated for a big acting award?
I mean, I think it's important to any actor, but let's say I 100% did not expect it from this movie. Of all the movies that I've been involved in, I mean, I'm kind of amazed, and it's kind of, it's just in this kind of environment of like everyone kind of questioning where movies are going, kind of what the future of cinema is, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly something like this was just really, really, I mean, in a lot of ways an abstract movie, and kind of, you know, it requires quite a lot from an audience, and like the fact that it's not just in 2 art house cinemas, and it's kind of, and it's got some kind of traction with people, like it's kind of, it's really, it's excited me about the future of, okay, what else does an audience want? I mean, it's kind of, if you can keep going, because this is sort of my oeuvre a little bit.
It is,
like,
yeah.
I want to keep going weirder and weirder and weirder.
Well, it could have been shot 100 years ago, and yet it's getting traction today. What do you think that is? Is there something missing in cinema that a void that this fills somehow, or what do you think is catching on with people?
I think it would have had the same effect 100 years ago. I mean, it's kind of, I think people watching, it's a kind of visceral experience. It feels very like holistic, as like it's kind of, you go that there's something about the aspect ratio, the black and white, the kind of the ornate language of it that's just, even people who don't really understand exactly what's going on, which is everybody.
Right. I confess. Yeah.
Like it's kind of it's this kind of this. It's sort of, it feels like a wave hitting you. I mean, I've kind of, the screenings we've been doing recently, like everybody looks like they need to go and have a nap afterwards. And it's kind of, I think it's like, yeah, it's a kind of it's a ride. I think people are kind of excited about that.
I do feel like the physical presentation makes you lean into it a little more.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I think in a movie you sit back and let it happen to you. Here I'm sort of leaning forward.
And it's also, there's something kind of, it's not pandering to an audience. It's very aggressive in saying like, this is the world, you either get into it or you don't. And I think that's definitely the kind of stuff that I like when I go to the theater anyway, when it's kind of, you know, I don't want to feel like the movie is trying to kind of chase after me to get me to like it. It's like, no, leave me alone.
Take it or leave it. Here it is. Hey guys, thanks for listening to the Sunday Sit-Down podcast. Stick around to hear more from Robert Pattinson after the break. Welcome back. Now more of my conversation with Robert Pattinson. So you were talking about how this film, The Lighthouse, has sort of become a piece of your oeuvre over the last 6 or 7 years. Was that a calculated strategy for you post-Twilight, that I want to sort of go down into this other place, not the big showy box office movies, but do some independent acting work?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've always sort of been my taste, and I kind of, it's funny, like, that's sort of how I was approaching the Twilight movies as well. I was sort of, I see all my interviews about them, I'd always just want to I'd promote them as if they were Cronenberg movies. I mean, I'd always be saying like, oh, I like chew through a placenta and I do all this stuff. It does happen in the movies, but these are kind of in the Twilight movies. But that's obviously not how they'd kind of really want to be. The studio did not want me to promote them like that.
Right.
But that's kind of how I always saw them. And I think I just kind of kept following down that same kind of mentality afterwards. But then just got lucky with a few directors. Like when I basically got this movie called Cosmopolis with David Cronenberg in 2012, which is the year I finished doing Twilight, and it just I just loved the experience so much, and kind of realized there was something about doing pretty esoteric movies that I thought. I mean, it's not necessarily just because they're esoteric. I just like the fact that they were just original.
Yeah.
Like, and you know, and sometimes it doesn't really work, but like sometimes, you know, I'm more interested in getting one person to really, really, really like it, and it's like to be their favorite movie, rather than get loads of people to just be like, oh, let's go and see that. Like, it's kind of
right.
Just generally what happens to my movies. One guy.
And that's good enough for you.
Yeah,
but I'm sure, I have to imagine after you make 5 movies that make more than $3 billion, there was a line of studios that said, here's your next big project. So did you have to decide in that post-Twilight moment, I could go this way or that way?
Kind of, but it just seemed like there are few, like, it's like there are very few examples of people who've kind of popped up really quickly and then tried to, you know, if you're trying to get hits the size of Twilight like all the time, like it's, you know, you're setting yourself up for a fail. Like you've got to think of a new angle. You have to see different gaps in the market. I thought that was the more dangerous option in terms of having a more longevity in a career, to kind of look for commercial fare. and also like I just thought it'd be so depressing if you just can't get employed anymore, and the only thing you try to do with your opportunity is just have another opportunity. Like
Right.
it's like I just always think if I still have the mentality that every movie I do is going to be the last movie I get, and so I want it to be something which is like kind of cool to go down for.
Well, you've done that with The Lighthouse without question. Was there any part of you on a personal level that just wanted to turn down the temperature on the celebrity aspect that came with Twilight and sort of dip down into these films that were great for an actor but wouldn't get you all the paparazzi and the rest of it?
I mean, I think you kind of. I think that as soon as your novelty wears off a little bit, I could feel that was not. I could feel right from the beginning it would never really last for that long anyway.
What gave you that feeling?
You can just tell anything which comes that quickly, like, unless you're feeding people novelty like the whole time. That seems to be the only way to maintain that kind of flame of celebrity, and I wasn't doing that at all. So it's kind of, I didn't even try to maintain it. But yeah, I never really. I wanted to continue getting movies. I was never really thinking about the other stuff. I understood that was part and parcel, and I always kind of thought from the beginning it wasn't that bad a price to pay for a pretty great life.
I'm thinking back as you're talking in recent conversations I've had like this with Orlando Bloom and Kit Harington, who both were sort of shot out of a cannon. Kit Harington into Game of Thrones, Orlando Bloom into the Lord of the Rings films, and saying they came out the other side of that like you did Twilight, and wanting to go back to the theater and sort of go back and do some of the things that didn't happen at the beginning of their careers because they were shot out of that cannon so quickly. Do you have any sense for that as well?
I genuinely feel like I'm still. I'm going after the same directors that I did before Twilight. I mean, I kind of like it's just like, you know, I was also auditioning for every single thing, but like, you know, the movies I wanted, the movies that I'm doing now, and it's kind of the same things I wanted when I was 20, and I think, yeah, I got into acting. I was interested in acting because of a specific type of director, and that's kind of still what I go for now.
When you started those Twilight movies, there's no way you could have seen what was coming with the success of the movies and what was going to happen to your life. Now that you've got some distance from the Twilight era in your career, are you able to look back and say, wow, that was insane on every possible level?
Yeah. I was weird. I was doing a screening yesterday. I think it was yesterday, or maybe the day before.
A lot going on.
With my friends, Eddie Redmayne and Tom Sturridge, and we did just have a little moment where it's like, I mean, I've known them for like 15 years now, and I'm auditioning with them. And when we were auditioning when we first started, I mean, it did sort of seem like. It felt like a joke then that anyone was asking us to audition for anything. And now the fact that 15 years later you're still having a career, it just seems like even more of a joke. But like,
right.
I mean, I can't believe that. I mean, it's absolutely insane. But, and also I'm so thankful as well that like, I just kind of, I like it more and more and more every year. I like the craft of it. I like every single time I get a movie. I love the camaraderie of it. Like, even like, I still get really excited about all like the kind of like the release of things. Like, get excited every single time I release a movie. I'm really, really curious to see what happens. And it kind of, I don't know, if it's for whatever reason, I think it's because I disassociate from a lot of the bad parts from it. But I'm not jaded about it at all. Which I'm pretty surprised about.
I don't think people realize you had a life as an actor before Twilight. Obviously, Harry Potter got you some recognition, but where did the acting thing begin for you? I know the story goes that your father sort of nudged you toward a production company to get over some shyness, but where did you start to feel like, oh, I like this acting thing, I like the reaction I get from a crowd, or I just like doing it?
I think I went to this kind of drama club, and I was working backstage because I liked a girl who went there. That's like literally the only reason I joined it. And then they did Guys and Dolls one year, and I just loved the movie of Guys and Dolls so much. And I'd never auditioned for anything, I'd never sung in front of anybody or done anything, and I really wanted to play Nathan Detroit. And I think as soon as you just done that first audition and you kind of crossed that line, it just sort of did something. And I knew I kind of wanted, I knew there was something in me that wanted to do it, but yeah, it's definitely, I mean, I did a play, I remember doing one play, I did a play called Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and there's a scene where I'm screaming at, they're playing Alec d'Urberville, and I'm screaming at Tess, and I saw these two people in the audience who were both kind of like absolutely horrified by this scene. And I was like, whoa, I'm getting high off this. and yeah, I kind of tried to look for those opportunities afterwards. And I still, it's so fun when you do it. When you do some, even on a film set, like you can still approach film. I still try and approach it sort of as if the crew is an audience. Like I think of them as I want them to sort of be reactive, even though it's literally their point is to not be reactive.
Right.
I still try and force it. Yeah, and it's kind of, you want to get those reactions all the time.
Well, The Lighthouse does have that feel. It is almost like a play. You know, I could see this as a stage play, certainly. Did you tap in for this part to some of your early roots, your theater roots? Or did it not feel that way when you're shooting with cameras and a crew around you?
I think it was actually very particular how they shot it, because you need so much light because we're shooting on black and white negative.
Right.
And so you could kind of, even we're doing these really long takes, they're actually very, very, very choreographed as well. So it's kind of, because if you're inches in the wrong place, then like you're just in total darkness. So it's kind of, I guess it is kind of like a play in some ways, but it's like a supercharged play. Where like, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do that every night for months. There's no way.
Right, no, God. No.
I'd be in hospital.
No, barely could do it once, I imagine. You're finished.
I think the director basically said, like, your only usable takes are your first and your last. It's either your first or your 30th.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
How did you and Willem get on during the shoot? Because as I said, it is such a grindy part, and you talked about early on in the rehearsals not wanting to give away too much. What was it like, just that one-on-one tight space?
I mean, it's great. I mean, it's kind of, Willem's just very, very, very alive in his performance, like, in every movie and in conversation. I mean, I've done interviews with him where we did one interview, I can't remember who it was for now, but we were talking about technique, and I'm just kind of, I don't know, half the time I'm doing an interview, I'm just saying some words. Like, I'm just the kind of fill
Not here,
space.
of course, but other interviews, yeah.
And I said something about technique, and Willem is just laser focused on me and like completely ignores the fact we're in an interview. Uses the entire interview time to like school me about about technique in a very, very nice way, but like very, very, very focused on it. And he's kind of like that in scenes where it's sort of like, I guess it's just another thing. When someone really, really loves it, like you kind of, it's just a lovely feeling when you have to be very, very, very present with them. And it's exciting to do scenes with him. But yeah, I was just frightened of failure at the beginning. I always just think, like, the first couple of weeks of a job, I just feel like they're just gonna say, yeah, this isn't gonna work out.
You still feel that way after all these years?
If it's ever happened to you once, which happened to me years ago, and I didn't see it coming then, so now I didn't realize you could get fired from acting jobs.
Is that healthy in some way, that little fear that gives you the edge?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
If you're not throwing up before every take, you're doing something wrong.
Was there some of that on this film?
Yeah.
From the throwing up and the nerves?
It's definitely, you kind of want to, I don't know, I used to get so paralyzed with anxiety before auditions and stuff that you do it, and I just I couldn't do anything in the audition. And I think I'd been trying to figure out a way for so many years to get rid of the anxiety by trying to calm yourself down, and it never worked, and nothing ever worked. And the only thing that really worked is just to get to use that anxiety as a charge, and just to kind of push it into some, like, you really like grip hold of it and kind of use it as energy. And so like now I'm addicted to it. Like it's like a kind of adrenaline junkie. So even in the kind of most low key scene, I'm kind of fully like ramping myself up for it.
And the source of that is anxiety, and you can just sort of channel it in a positive direction.
Yeah, it's everything. You build everything from anxiety and fear.
Wow. So as we're talking about this beautiful sort of almost art house movie, I'm thinking now to your next projects. We were just discussing, you just wrapped a film with Christopher Nolan, and of course you'll be playing Batman in a film that comes out in a couple of years.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me, based on...
Crazy to say that in a couple of years.
Yeah, 2021, right?
Yeah.
But it sounds to me, just talking here, you're not the kind of guy who sort of strategically plans his career. You just do good things. But as you know, these will be 2 big movies again.
Yeah.
Was that a calculated move?
And not particularly. I mean, it's kind of, I'm looking for sort of the opposite of what you've done last, and then, and you're kind of, I don't know. I mean, Chris's movie just came kind of out of nowhere, and I kind of was literally like, yeah. I mean, I think because Chris makes art house movies. I mean, like Dunkirk is an art house movie. It's just got a big budget, and it kind of, there's no dialogue. It's kind of, I mean, it feels almost like an experimental film. And like all his movies sort of seem like that. He's been making these kind of adult noir movies with these enormous budgets, and they're all to connect on this massive global audience. I mean, it's just, his career is insane.
Right.
Like, but I love his style and stuff, and so yeah, I thought I would have worked with him at any point.
What was it like to step into his universe? As you say, the kind of things you do already, but with $100 million behind it, or whatever the budget is.
I mean, it's funny because you kind of, it's the same at the end of the day. Like when you kind of, it's pretty astonishing when you see like an enormous set, and there's thousands of extras and all this stuff going on everywhere, and it's still it's just for the camera. It's just for the little tiny square. All of this around you. Right. It's just for one dude's eye. Yeah. So it's really, it's kind of bizarre, but very, very fun, and kind of it's just so nice to do this stuff with no green screen as well, which it's so much fun.
And some stunts as well, maybe, right?
Yeah, just a lot of. Like, I really felt my age.
Stick around to hear more from Robert Pattinson on the Sunday Sitdown podcast, including why he immediately said yes to taking on the iconic role of Batman. Welcome back to the Sunday Sitdown podcast. Now more of my conversation with Robert Pattinson. And then I have to ask you about Batman. That came to you, and you thought, what? Do you want to be a superhero?
I'm always funny saying, Batman's not a superhero.
Whoa, forgive me. How do we classify
it's weird,
that?
I always balk at it. I'm like, it doesn't count. You need to have like magical powers.
I mean,
to
he's
be a
got a
superhero.
cape, so that's a pretty good start.
Yeah. The cape is there. Yeah, I'll give you that one.
What did you think when you first heard that offer?
Like an immediate yes.
Yeah.
No, it's kind of, I love the kind of history of the part. I love every iteration of how it's been played. I love, I think it's a very, very, very special part, and I think it's been very carefully what's the word? I don't know. I feel like everyone's really looked after the character over its history, and it kind of, there's a lot of reverence for it. You can really feel it at the studio, and yeah, it's just a very. I mean, it's just you can't say no to it. And I really wanted to say yes.
Yeah. And what do you do as an actor to get ready for a part like that? That's quite different from The Lighthouse, for example.
don't know yet.
Is there a physical aspect to it, or the things that you need to do to get ready differently?
Yeah, there's like a few little things. But I mean, it's cool. I think Matt Reeves has got a really good direction for it, and I don't know, I'm very kind of eager to get started on it, because it's a lot of expectation.
Is there any consideration in your mind when you get an offer like that of, okay, kind of here we go again, I'm going to be up on billboards and my face and my life and everything else will be back out there? Because you've done such a good job recently in keeping a relatively low profile compared to the Twilight years. Do you think about that?
I mean, there's a part of me that just thinks like it is impossible to kind of be at like what happened at Twilight, because it was just so sudden, like, and like now I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm hoping it won't be people hanging out outside my place. I'm just thinking I'm kind of boring and old now, so it's sort of
that helps.
It's fine. I barely ever go out anyway.
I think you're right though when you say in the Instagram age, it's less interesting to get a photograph of you taking out your garbage.
Yeah.
It just is, right?
And it's a kind of, it's the one benefit of having a very youth-centric culture.
Yeah.
Because literally, like, I don't know, I'm kind of, we're thrown in the middle-aged heap already now.
They've moved past
the trash.
People just swipe to the next photograph. Right. Enough of this. Well, congratulations. It is an extraordinary film. It's great to talk to you.
Thanks a lot, man.
Robert. Thank you. Well, there you have it, Maggie. He's entered middle age. I'm not sure what that makes Sylvie, you and me. If he's middle aged, we're ready for
I was
the
going to say, I'm not that far away from 33, so if that's middle age, I'm a little worried.
Sylvie and I are at the end of the road. Great conversation with Robert Pattinson. Super interesting guy who, even though he is only 33, has lived a lot of Hollywood life. He's seen a lot. Fun to talk with him. His new movie, The Lighthouse, is in theaters now. My thanks, as always, to all of you for tuning in this week. Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Sylvie. If you want to hear more of the full-length conversations with my guests every week, be sure to click subscribe so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to tune in to Sunday Today every weekend on NBC. I'm Willie Geist. We'll see you right back here next week on the Sunday Sit Down podcast.